Should more people support rescue channels like this? The scream didn't sound like an animal at first. It ripped through the roar of the wildfire and the low growl of our engine like something human, sharp, panicked, breaking apart mid-breath. My foot froze above the brake as ash drifted across the windshield, the sky burning orange and gray, the road ahead trembling with heat. Every warning screamed, "Keep driving. Don't stop here, don't risk it now." But the sound came again, weaker this time, as if whatever was making it was already running out of air. I pulled over without thinking. The truck shuddered to a halt, and when I opened the door, heat poured in like a living thing. The smell of burning pine and melted plastic clawed at my lungs. Somewhere beyond the guardrail, hidden by smoke and scorched brush, something was crying. Not to be saved, not even to be found, but because silence would have meant surrender. I stood there, heart hammering, listening to that small voice fracture and fade. And I knew before I saw anything that this was the moment where turning away would cost more than stopping ever could. The clinic light was nothing like firelight. It was white and unforgiving, stripping everything down to what could not be hidden. The German shepherd mother was carried inside on a stretcher, her body wrapped in temporary bandages that did little to soften the truth of her injuries. Burned fur clung to her skin, and the sharp smell of smoke still lived in her coat. Her eyes stayed open as they moved her, dark and glassy, searching only for one thing. When the puppy was taken from my arms and set a few feet away, her breathing stuttered, a shallow hitch that betrayed how close she was to slipping. The puppy was placed in a small enclosure with a blanket that smelled of disinfectant and unfamiliar hands. His body trembled even when he was still, his injured back leg stiff and unresponsive. The veterinarian spoke quietly about nerve damage and smoke exposure, about timeframes and possibilities that were carefully worded to avoid promises. I listened, nodding, while watching the puppy's eyes track every movement in the room. Each time the mother shifted or made a sound, his head lifted, ears straining, as if his entire world narrowed to the rhythm of her breathing. Night fell without ceremony. Outside, the air finally cooled, but inside the clinic time thickened. Machines hummed and beeped, oxygen flowed in soft, steady whispers. And somewhere down the hall another animal cried out in pain. The mother drifted in and out of consciousness, her chest rising unevenly. Pain medication dulled the edges but could not quiet her instinct. Every time she woke, her gaze searched until it found the puppy. Only then did her body relax, if only slightly, as though proximity itself was medicine. When they were moved closer together, something shifted. The mother's nose flared, catching the familiar scent of her pup, and her breathing slowed by fractions of a second. The puppy pressed himself against the side of his enclosure, dragging his weak leg behind him until his nose touched the metal barrier between them. He made a sound then, not a scream, but a thin, fragile note of recognition. The mother answered with a low whine, barely audible, yet full of intention. In that exchange, silent and brief, there was relief. Just before morning, the mother's condition worsened. Her breaths became rapid and shallow, her body tensing against invisible waves of pain. Staff moved quickly, voices urgent but controlled, hands practiced and precise. The puppy sensed the change immediately. He grew restless, pacing in small, uneven circles, his whimpers rising and falling with her alarms. He did not understand machines or numbers, only that something essential was faltering. When her breathing finally steadied, the room seemed to exhale with her. Dawn arrived as a pale wash through narrow windows. The fire was no longer visible, but its presence lingered in every scar and cough. The puppy slept at last, his small body curled toward his mother, exhaustion overtaking fear. She watched him with half-lidded eyes, her strength depleted, her body altered forever. Survival had not brought relief, it had brought responsibility. She had stayed once, through heat and flame, and now she stayed again, through pain and uncertainty. This was the truth no one prepared us for. Rescue was not an ending. It was a doorway into something harder. Healing demanded patience, presence, and the courage to endure without guarantees. The mother and her puppy began that work together, bound not by hope of recovery, but by the simple, stubborn act of remaining alive beside one another. In the quiet moments between treatments, I understood that their bond was doing work no medicine could replicate. The mother's eyes followed the puppy's smallest movements, memorizing him again, as if afraid fire might steal details from her memory. The puppy slept better when she was near, his breaths deeper, his dreams less violent. They were injured in different ways, but they regulated each other, shared warmth through air and sound and scent. Even surrounded by sterile walls, they rebuilt a sense of safety, fragile yet unmistakably real. That quiet resilience became the foundation for everything that followed, unseen but unbreakable inside their shared fragile future. The clinic light was merciless, a clean white glare that stripped away any illusion of safety. Firelight had been chaotic and wild, but this light revealed everything the flames had left behind. The German Shepherd mother lay on a steel table wrapped in gauze and cooling pads, her body shockingly still beneath the rise and fall of shallow breaths. Burned fur clung to her skin in uneven patches, and the sharp smell of smoke lingered in her coat despite repeated cleanings. Her eyes remained open, dark and watchful, tracking movement in the room with quiet urgency rather than fear. The puppy was placed nearby in a low enclosure lined with blankets that smelled of antiseptic and unfamiliar hands. His body trembled even when he rested, small muscles twitching as though still running from something only he could see. One back leg refused to carry his weight, dragging uselessly when he tried to move. The veterinarian spoke gently about nerve damage, smoke inhalation, and the long uncertainty ahead, choosing words that balanced honesty with mercy. I listened without interrupting, my attention fixed on how the puppy's ears lifted every time his mother shifted. Night settled slowly, stretching itself across the clinic in long, humming hours. Machines pulsed with quiet persistence, oxygen flowed in measured whispers, and footsteps echoed down distant corridors. The mother drifted between consciousness and sleep, her breathing uneven, her body tense even at rest. Pain medication softened her reactions but never fully relaxed her posture. Each time she woke, her eyes searched the room until they found the puppy. Only then did her chest ease, as if proximity itself could hold her together. When the staff moved them closer, something unspoken changed. The mother's nose flared, recognizing a familiar scent, and her breathing slowed by degrees so small they were almost imagined. The puppy pressed himself against the side of his enclosure, dragging his weak leg behind him until his nose touched the metal barrier between them. He made a thin, fragile sound, not a cry but a question. The mother answered with a low whine, barely audible, yet weighted with intention. In that exchange, brief and quiet, relief passed between them. Just before dawn, her condition worsened. Her breaths became rapid and shallow, her body tightening as alarms began to sound. Staff moved quickly but calmly, hands practiced, voices controlled. The puppy sensed the shift immediately. He grew restless, pacing in uneven circles, his small whimpers rising and falling in answer to the machines. He did not understand what was happening, only that something essential was slipping. When her breathing finally steadied, the room released a breath it did not know it was holding. Morning light filtered through narrow windows, pale and tentative. The fire was no longer visible, but its presence lived on in every scar and rasping breath. The puppy slept at last, curled toward his mother, exhaustion overtaking vigilance. She watched him with half-lidded eyes, her strength diminished, her body forever altered. Survival had not brought relief. It had brought responsibility. She had stayed once, through flame and smoke, and now she stayed again through pain and uncertainty. This was the truth no one prepared us for. Rescue was not an ending but an entrance into something harder. Healing demanded patience, presence, and endurance without promise. The mother and her puppy began that work together, not through hope of recovery, but through the simple refusal to let go while life still moved between them. In the quiet intervals between treatments, their bond did work no medication could replicate. The mother's gaze followed the puppy's smallest movements, memorizing him again as if afraid fire might erase details from her memory. The puppy slept deeper when she was near, his breathing slower, his body less rigid with fear. Through scent, sound, and shared space, they rebuilt a fragile sense of safety. Even inside sterile walls, surrounded by beeping machines and strangers, they began forming the foundation that would carry them forward, scarred but alive. Nothing about it was dramatic, but it was real. And that quiet persistence became the only reason either of them was still breathing there together in that room against impossible remaining odds. Recovery did not arrive like relief. It arrived like routine. Days folded into each other inside the clinic, marked by the same quiet rituals repeated until they began to feel like progress. The German Shepherd mother learned the limits of her altered body slowly. Standing took effort now. Breathing demanded attention. Her lungs no longer worked without complaint. Each inhale slightly shallow, each exhale measured. But she stayed present, even when pain dulled her awareness, Even when exhaustion dragged her eyelids down, she never lost track of where her puppy was. The puppy healed faster in ways that were visible. His burns faded from angry red to tender pink, then slowly to new fur pushing through in uneven patches. His appetite returned in cautious bursts, each meal followed by a deep, heavy sleep. Yet his injured leg remained stubborn. It lagged behind his growing confidence, refusing to cooperate fully. He tried anyway. Again and again he attempted to stand, to walk, to follow instincts older than fear. Most attempts ended with him tipping forward, surprised more than hurt. Each fall sent his eyes immediately to his mother, checking not for help but for permission to keep trying. She gave it without moving, a steady gaze, a slow blink, a quiet sound in her throat that vibrated low and reassuring. She could not rise to support him, could not guide him physically, but her presence anchored him. It told him the world had not ended just because his body had changed. It told him falling was not failure. They were moved to a quieter recovery room as space opened up. The noise softened there. Fewer alarms, fewer rushed footsteps. In the afternoon, sunlight slipped through a narrow window and settled on the floor in pale rectangles. Dust floated in those beams, slow and harmless. The puppy discovered the warmth quickly. He dragged himself into it and stretched out, his small body relaxing in a way it hadn't since the fire. The mother watched him with complete focus, lifting her head just enough to keep him in sight. Trust returned in increments too small to measure. The puppy stopped startling at every sudden sound. His sleep deepened. His breathing evened out. The mother allowed herself longer periods of rest, her body slowly relearning that danger was not immediate. Nurses became familiar shapes. Hands no longer meant pain every time. Healing revealed itself not through milestones but through absence. The absence of panic, of constant tension, of that sharp edge of survival mode. One afternoon, without warning or audience, the puppy stood. It wasn't graceful. His injured leg dragged slightly, his balance uncertain, but he held himself upright for 3 full steps. No one spoke, no one moved. When he stopped, wobbling but standing, he looked almost confused. Then his tail moved once, tentative and unsure. He turned his head toward his mother. She answered with the smallest movement she could manage. A shift of her head, a soft exhale. Pride filled the space between them without sound. The mother's recovery was less forgiving. Good days were followed by bad ones without explanation. Some mornings her breathing was steady, almost peaceful. Other days it rattled, shallow and labored, her body reminding everyone that fire leaves debts behind. Setbacks arrived without warning. Each one threatened to undo the fragile stability they were building, and yet she endured. She adapted to shorter walks, longer rests, careful monitoring. She learned the rhythm of her limitations and did not fight them. She conserved her strength for what mattered. The puppy sensed her vulnerability even as he grew stronger. On days when her breathing worsened, he stayed closer. He slept pressed against the barrier separating them, his small body angled toward her, as if proximity itself could offer protection. On better days, he explored, testing his improving coordination, always returning to check that she was still watching. What they were learning together was not how to return to who they were before. That version no longer existed. They were learning how to exist now. How to inhabit bodies marked by trauma without surrendering to it. How to accept help without losing dignity. How to breathe again, not deeply, not effortlessly, but intentionally. Recovery did not erase what happened. It reorganized it. The fire remained present in scars, in damaged lungs, in the way both of them startled at certain smells. But it no longer owned every moment. Between breaths, between steps, between shared glances, something steadier took root. Not hope exactly. Something quieter, something stronger. The understanding that survival was no longer accidental. It was being chosen, minute by minute, together. The setback arrived without warning, the way fires often do. One moment the room was calmed, filled with the low hum of afternoon and the steady rhythm they had learned to trust, and the next the mother's breathing changed. It was subtle at first, a tightening in her chest, a pause that lasted a fraction too long. Then her sides began to work harder, ribs pulling inward, her breath scraping instead of flowing. The room seemed to contract around her. Machines noticed before people did, alarms cutting through the quiet with sharp insistence. Hands moved quickly again, efficient and practiced, but the atmosphere shifted instantly. The puppy felt it before anyone spoke. He stopped what he was doing and froze, ears pinned back, body angled toward his mother. His tail dropped. A sound rose in his throat and stayed there, trapped, unsure whether to become a cry. He dragged himself closer to the barrier separating them, his injured leg catching awkwardly as panic erased coordination. He did not understand lungs or complications or scar tissue. He understood only that the steady thing anchoring his world was faltering. The mother's eyes widened as her body struggled. Fear flickered there, brief but unmistakable, followed by something else. Determination sharpened by exhaustion. She did not thrash or resist. She held herself still, conserving what little strength she had left, her gaze fixed on her puppy as if anchoring herself to him. Oxygen masks were adjusted, medication administered, voices overlapping in low urgency. The puppy whimpered, a thin, desperate sound that cut through the clinical calm. He pawed at the barrier, nails scraping metal, refusing to settle. Time stretched again, elastic and cruel. Every second felt heavier than the last. The room filled with memory. The roar of fire, the smell of smoke, the moment her body had given out on the hillside. Trauma does not announce itself when it returns. It simply steps back into the room and takes up space. For a moment, it felt as though the fire had followed them here, invisible but relentless, reclaiming what it had failed to take the first time. The puppy's distress escalated as her breathing worsened. He cried openly now, voice breaking, chest heaving with effort. It was the same sound that had stopped the truck days ago, stripped down and raw. Staff tried to soothe him, gentle hands and murmured reassurances, but he resisted, eyes never leaving his mother. His cries were not noise, they were communication. They were insistence. He was calling her back, the only way he knew how. Something shifted then. The mother's breathing did not improve immediately, but her focus sharpened. Her eyes locked onto her puppy's face, and she released a low, resonant sound from deep in her chest. It was not loud, it was not strong, but it was deliberate. The puppy stilled, his cries breaking off into hiccuping breaths. He pressed his face against the barrier and listened. That sound grounded him, just as his presence anchored her. They held each other there, suspended between crisis and collapse. Gradually, painfully, her breathing eased. The alarm softened. The tension in the room loosened by degrees. Relief arrived cautiously, as if afraid to tempt fate. No one celebrated. No one spoke above a whisper. The puppy slumped against the barrier, exhausted, his body trembling with delayed fear. The mother closed her eyes for a long moment, her head sinking back against the bedding. She had not won. She had survived another round. That night was long and watchful. The puppy barely slept, waking at every shift in sound, every change in rhythm. When he did rest, it was light and fitful, his dreams restless. The mother remained fragile, her body reminding everyone that survival came with ongoing cost. This was the price of staying. This was the debt fire demanded even after it passed. By morning, exhaustion weighed on everyone. The crisis had receded, but it had left marks. The puppy clung closer than before, his newfound independence temporarily abandoned. The mother's strength was diminished, her recovery set back, but they were still together. Still breathing in the same space. Still choosing, in the only ways available to them, not to let go. This was the true climax of their story, not a dramatic rescue or triumphant recovery, but a quiet, terrifying moment where everything nearly unraveled. Where love was tested not by action but by endurance. Where survival depended not on speed or strength but on the simple, stubborn refusal to surrender to what had already taken so much. The fire was gone. The smoke had lifted, leaving a world washed in the pale clarity of aftermath. The scars remained, on the land, on the bodies that had survived, and in the memory of those moments when survival had hung by a thread. The German shepherd mother lay in the shade near the clinic window, her chest rising in slower, steadier breaths than anyone had dared hope for. Her fur was regrowing unevenly, patches of new hair soft against charred skin. Her eyes had softened too, still watchful, still alert, but no longer frantic. She no longer needed to scan constantly for danger. She could rest, for the first time in weeks, and simply exist. The puppy padded beside her, each step measured, careful, almost tentative. His injured leg had healed enough for movement, though he still limped slightly, a living reminder of what they had endured. He climbed over her side, resting his head against her shoulder, and for a long moment neither moved. There were no alarms, no panicked cries, no heat pressing in from all sides, just the slow, gentle rhythm of shared breath. The mother's low exhale met the puppy's soft sigh, a quiet acknowledgement that they had both survived. In that rhythm, the fire no longer had a voice. The clinic was quiet that morning. Nurses and staff moved with subdued efficiency, giving the two space, allowing them to reclaim the small piece of normalcy that remained. Sunlight shifted across the floor, touching fur and blanket and the tips of their ears. The puppy's tail gave a slow wag, his eyes half closed in comfort. The mother lifted her head, sniffed him briefly, and pressed her nose to his. No words were needed. Trust, presence, and the act of staying alive together said more than any human could. Recovery continued, slow and deliberate. But now it carried a sense of purpose rather than fear. Walks were short, careful, rest periods longer, measured. The mother taught caution with her eyes, the puppy learned patience with his body. They learned each other's rhythms anew, the lessons carved by pain and fear transforming into habits of survival and care. And in those small moments, hope emerged, not explosive or dramatic, but steady and luminous, like sunlight reflecting off calm water. Months passed, and the world outside grew indifferent again, the fire now a memory in the hills behind the clinic. But inside their shared space, a new reality had taken root. They were no longer victims, merely surviving, they were living together. Each breath, each step, each quiet night held meaning. They had endured, and the endurance itself became a testament to what mattered: love, presence, and the unspoken promise that no one would be left behind. One afternoon, the puppy stood fully, not dragging his leg, not stumbling, but moving toward his mother with the tentative confidence of someone who had learned pain could be survived. She watched him, ears tilted, eyes shining, and when he reached her side, he nuzzled into her chest. She responded with a slow, deep exhale, letting her head rest beside him. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent to their scars and survival, but in that moment, the fire had no claim here. Life did. And as sunlight warmed the floor and dust motes danced lazily in the beams, they remained together, scarred, changed, and alive. The screams that had stopped the truck days before were now replaced by quiet breaths, shared and steady. What survived the fire was not just flesh and bone, but the bond between mother and pup, unbroken, steadfast, and luminous. The fire had taken, burned, and threatened. But it could not sever the thread that tethered them to one another. It could not erase the resilience that had grown from ash. In the fading light, they rested. The mother's eyes closed fully, the puppy curled against her side. The world beyond the clinic continued, bright and harsh, yet inside that small space, a fragile, undeniable truth lingered: survival had been chosen, love had been defended, and they had endured. And in the hush that followed, after weeks of fear and chaos, that quiet, steady presence, their shared breath, their closeness, was enough. Enough to declare that life, after all, could still be beautiful.